Welcome back, Rabbi Dr. Eliezer Brut. We are about to begin season 3, discussing the Sfarim of Reb Chaim Kanievsky. If you liked and enjoyed season 1, which was very focused on Reb Chaim's Sfarim, many of them you may have been familiar with. Season 3 is going to be focusing heavily on Sfarim. It's going to be Sfarim based, and we're going to be focusing on Sfarim that you may not have heard of, or even if you did, likely haven't opened. I guess I can speak for myself, but I'm assuming many people have not opened many of Reb Chaim's Sfarim. So we'd love to hear about them from Rabbi Dr. Eliezer Brut. And we again thank our anonymous sponsor who is sponsoring this season with Zecha Nishmas, Ramosha Chaim ben Yitzchak David. His neshama should have an aliyah. So we're going to begin with a couple of episodes on the Masechtas Ketanis. Reb Chaim Kanievsky wrote Peirushim on the Masechtas Ketanis. Rabbi Brut will tell us what they are, how the Sfarim were written, and he's going to give us a little bit more insight to what he plans on covering in season 3. Rabbi Doctor, take it away.
Okay, so first, the first few episodes of this season, Mirz Hashem, we hope to talk about, as you just said, his Perushim on the Sheva Masechtos. Chaim wrote a systematic Peirush over a bunch of years, which we'll discuss right now. Masechtas Tzitzis, Tefillin, Mezuzah, Sefer Torah, Avadim, and Kusim, and Gerim. Along the way, he also wrote a Peirush, which is included in this, on Shulchan Aruch, Hilchos Gerim, and Hilchos Mezuzah. And he threw in Masechtas from Madura Beis, it's called, and Masechtas Kal Rabasi. So these will be the first few episodes where we will discuss, first of all, where in the world, what are these 7 Masechtas, where they come from, how far back, and then what Reb Chaim was doing in his Perushim, and discuss some various Chedushim of Reb Chaim Kanievsky in Hilchos, Mezuzah, Tefillin, and Tzitzis from various examples. Also, we'll be using a brand new Sefer of Reb Chaim that was just published from manuscript, called Kuntris Zechroinus, which is stuff that he heard from the Chazon Ish, and also play out with some aspects in Hilchos Tefillin, Mezuzah, and Tzitzis. There's some of the episodes that we'll discuss. In addition, we'll be discussing some of his Sfarim, some less known, his Brisa de Mazalois, Brisa de Meleches HaMishkan, his Derech Chachma, Shekel HaKodesh, his Archas Yosher, his famous Musar Sefer, the Time of the Kra, Lemechse Atik, and some others. So that is what we, Mirz Hashem, hope to be doing amongst some of the discussions in the coming episodes. Okay, so now today, starting like this. In 1962 and finishing in 1998, Reb Chaim authored a few works that he's famous for. The people know, oh yeah, if you say there's some Masechtas Tefillin, they heard, yeah, there's something called Masechtas Tefillin. What is it? I don't know. Chaim Kanievsky wrote about it. Okay. Now, when does he begin working on this project? So in 1962, he completes in Parshas Pekudei, Masechtas Tzitzis, and then in Matzah Shabbos Kodesh, Parshas Kisavai of the same year, he completes Masechtas Tefillin. Now, it's interesting is because people, I always grew up hearing that Reb Chaim Kanievsky would only on a leap year would he write a sefer, because he was finished his chayvus, so to speak. But here we see in 1 year he's popping out 2 chashuvos far. Anyway, included in this work on Tefillin, which we will also discuss, is a chibur of his that he wrote about Itur. What about a lefty and all different aspects of this? And Kol Tarakula, he has a kuntris which he wrote for his father. Okay, now then he goes on the next year, which again is in contradiction to the shmur that they say over, and he puts out a work on Hilchos Mezuzah, on Masechtas Mezuzah, and then he decides he's going to include, he feels there's not enough work done on Shulchan Aruch Mezuzah, so he puts out a Mishnah Berurah style work on Hilchos Mezuzah. He throws in, as a bonus, Hilchos Maika, it's 1 siman, so he puts in a similar thing. Because of this, he becomes famous for being an expert in mezuzah, because already in the 60s he wrote about Hilchos Mezuzah very biyun, and he gets thousands of questions over the years, and eventually Das Noita, they put out, one of the first volumes they put out is on Hilchos Mezuzah. So we'll be discussing some chedushim of his in the Sugis Mezuzah and Mirz Hashem. Continuing 2 years later, he puts out Masechtas Avadim, a whole thorough work, and then in the same year he puts out Masechtas Kusim. Okay, then he stops. and it's not even clear if he was ever going to finish. And then I guess he had time after he finishes his Derech Emunah, and he decides, you know what, he's going to finish the rest of the 7 Masechtas as they're known, and he publishes on Sefer Torah in 1998 and Maseches Gerim. Once again, Maseches Gerim, he puts in a small Mishnah Berurah type Chibur at the end of the Chibur of the halachas based on Shulchan Aruch. Okay. All these Sfarim are written as with a be'iyun, a very, very intense be'iyun dika Peirush, and a small Peirush on the side, b'kitzer dika Peirush, and he also includes Maseches Shas, where all the sugyas are mentioned in Shas, okay, which we'll discuss, and that is what he does over these years. Now, what is the reason? What's his motive? What does he say why he decided to do this? And Mirza Shem we'll get to. But before anything, the question really is, what are these Masechtos? What are these? How far back do they go? When were they first published? Was it now? So what happens is like this. Many people know. You open up your Gemara, a standard Shas Masechtas Avodah Zarah. In the back, after Avos, you'll find in Mishnayos Avos, and then all of a sudden you see there's something called Avos Teram Nasan, and after Avos Teram Nasan is you'll see other small little Masechtos. One is Masechtas Seifrim, which is very important, and then Masechtas Machos, Kala Rabasi, Kala, Derech Eretz Zuta, and then all of a sudden you see, and if you turn too fast, you might miss it, but there's a few pages, about 4 or 5 pages, which has on it Gerim, and then after Gerim, it goes to Kusim, Avadim, Sefer Torah, Tefillin, Tzitzis, and Mezuzah. So the question is, was this always in the standard Gemara Avodah Zarah back from the printing, from when the Shas started to be published, or not? Anyway, it turns out that, as we're going to see today, these Masechtas were pretty much lost for centuries, and only over recent, relatively in the past few hundred years, were they first published. What happens is like this. In 1714 and through 1717, a publication of a Shas began in Amsterdam. In the intro of one of the first volumes, they said one of the things they're going to have is the Masechtas Ketanos, and they have new stuff, better and better edition of it, and then they have Masechtes Gerim that was never published before. Ashaloi haya loy lamim. And then they're going to say we also have something called Masechtas Eretz Yisrael. Shaloi noidim tziyas, no one knows what it is, and we have it. Now, what's going on over here is, in general, a new Shas is a very expensive endeavor. So what they would do is, it was like an advertisement tool to get people to buy their product. They would say, we're getting all different, we're going to be adding in all these types of things. And they also they sought out new materials so that people would specifically buy their edition. At the end of the day, in this Shas, even though they announced that they're going to be publishing Masechtas Gerim, Masechtas Eretz Yisrael, it was not published. Not only that, we don't even know what in the world is this Masechtas Eretz Yisrael that they're referring to. It's been a mystery out of here. But Masechtas Gerim that they were going to publish, we don't even know where were they going to get it from. Where did they have this Masechtas Gerim, as we're going to see. Now, a few years later, another Shas, Mamish, in the 1720s, also began to be published, and they also announced we're going to publish it with Masechtas Gerim and everything, and they also don't end up, they sort of announce that they're going to publish Masechtas Gerim, and it's not found there. And it's a mystery. What were they even referring to? Where did they even know about a Masechtas Gerim? Where did they have a Masechtas Gerim? Now, what's interesting is like this, is that at that time, in the introductions, they got materials from the incredible library, which we've mentioned a few different times, from David Oppenheim, manuscripts, and they included in their works. But the question is, Masechtas Gerim is not, as far as I'm able to tell in the various catalogs of his library, he did not have a Masechtas Gerim manuscript. So where were they even going to get Masechtas Gerim? I mean, say there was no printed edition of Masechtas Gerim at this time, so where were they going to even get it from? Okay. Lamaisa, Marvin Heller, in his excellent works on the printing of the Talmud, he has a useful discussion on these two publications of the Shas, but he doesn't deal with this specific issue of what was going on and why, in the end, did they advertise something and then they didn't follow through. Reb Nassim Natar Rabinovich, in his amazing work, Maimer al Tfasas Talmud, so he throws out there a possibility. He doesn't say that this is the pshat because he doesn't document it. He says maybe, ulai, in Masechtas Gerim Eretz Yisrael, the Gedolim that were involved with the publishing, they used to have to get skamas and everything. So they didn't want to put it in because they didn't know where in the world is this Masechtas Gerim that you publishers are coming up with. Where is it from? Maybe it's not even authentic. But He doesn't cite any proofs for such a claim. Okay, fast forward a few years later, but we're going to find out a little bit more about this. But before we go on, at this point, the only Masechta that's being discussed of the Sheva Masechtos, as we're going to learn about, is Maseches Gerim. There's no other Masechtas, such as Tefillin, Mezuzah, that we said Chaim is writing a Peirush on. Okay, a few years later, 1754, a person I'm very fond of talking about, the Chida, in his famous travels. So he marks down an incredible event that happens to him. He sees on the 23rd of Sivan, he describes as follows. He gets to some house, and he says the name of the person, and he sees a Talmud Shalom, Miksav Yasha Noishon Al Klaf, the Kol Hashas B'Kovetz Echad. It has everything, and it says it's written from a relative of Rabbeinu Shimshon Mishantz. It says a date. The Sham Ra'isi Bechlal HaMasechthos Ketanois KeMasechtos Seifrim. Now, we're not going to get into Masechtos Seifrim now, but Masechtos Seifrim was already published. The Smachos, which was also published, but then he says Masechtes Gerim Ketana Bekamos Me'oid Bekarati Arba V'Chamisha Dafim in Masechta. And then he talks about that he looked at Masechtas Hayrius, etc., etc. So he's saying, I saw the manuscript. He's identifying this manuscript, and this is happening when? In 1754. But again, there's no mention that in this manuscript that the Chida saw of any other of the 7 Masechtas that Chaim goes ahead and writes a Peirush on. Fine. Fast forward to 1782, this is many years later. The Chida publishes a Haggadah Shal Pesach, called Simchas HaRegel, and in the back he publishes Masechtes Gerim for the first time. Okay, great. 1790 comes along. A work is published on various Masechtas Ketanos called Nachlas Yaakov, and in there he has a Peirush on Masechtas Seifrim and stuff like that, and he publishes the first time ever a Peirush on Masechtes Gerim. Why does he publish it? So he writes, interestingly, in the introduction, that there's an akuda that every person was given at Sinai specific areas of Torah to be mechadish. So he felt, it seems, that this was his area that he should be mechadish to work on, and he writes a Peirush on Masechtas Seifrim v'chulu, and also Masechtas Gerim. So the first time Masechtas Gerim there's even any Peirush is 1790. The first time it's being published is 1782. Beforehand, there's no publication of it. Going a little further, 1802, R Avrohom Ben HaGra publishes in the back of his Medrash Haggadah Bereshis, where he has an important introduction about Midrashim, he publishes at the end Masechtas Gerim. So again, one Masechta of the 7 Masechtas is published for the second time in 1882. He says he got it from the Chida Simchas HaRegel. Okay, now this point is not even mentioned by others to realize that it was published a second time at this point. Okay. In 1804, his Medrash Haggadah was plagiarized, meaning to say it was stolen without giving him credit, and all the introduction, the notes, is its own interesting story, but they cut out Masechtas Gerim for whatever reasons. Okay. Moving on, in 1805, the Chida publishes Masechtas Gerim again. So what? What's the significance of this? Is that when he publishes it, he basically, it's in a work called Maris Ayin, and it seems he got more nuschos to Masechtas Gerim, which he's including over here. He says a better nusach, more complete, and he now has something called Masechtas Kusim and Avadim. So now we're up to 3 of the Masechtas that he's publishing for the first time. L'maisa, does anyone use Masechtas Gerim? So we mentioned already that there's a Peirush in Nachlas Yaakov. The Chida does. Kedarkai and Birkei Yosef, he quotes a few times Masechtas Gerim for different aspects in Hilchos Geros. Fine. Fast forward a few more years, 1816, a Yid Rabbi Yehuda Nagar, he publishes the first serious work on Avadim, Kusim, and Gerim. But the whole point is that at this time, again, we're at the years 1816, there's no mention of any other Masechtas that exist. Okay. Another unknown work is in 1821, a small work comes out on Medrash Haggadah Bereshis. Inside this work, there's a few pages on the Masechtos Gerim. It's called Mishan Mayim. It has a beautiful come from the Chai Yadam, who knew the author very well. He was an interesting Yid, Reb Tzemach Landau. One wants to read up about him. We could find about him in the published volume Ir Vilna Chelik Beis in recent years from manuscript of Nachum Steinschneider. Okay, but the point is, up till now, we only have 3 Masechtas. Where are the other Masechtas? Reb Chaim, we said again, 7 Masechtas. So we, in many, many episodes by now, people know that I'm about what you could guess what's next word I'm going to say. We open up the Chida, Shem Agdolim. So the Shem Agdolim, he deals with this issue in a few different places. Remember, he's the person who publishes Masechtes Gerim. So in one place he says that he describes, I saw it. Okay, fine. Now the question is, but did anyone have it? What is it that he saw? So he says like this, that the Migdal Oiz brings down in Rambam, when he's talking about the Rambam, a few times he brings quotes from a Masechtes Gerim. Okay? Then he says, he brings down a piece from the newly published, at the time the Chida wrote this, from the Maseches Mishnah, who's talking about the Sugya, and he says, if the Maseches Mishnah would have realized that there is a Masechtas Gerim, whatever he says, he wouldn't have said, okay, fine. Then the Chida says that a few years later, this Nachlas Yaakov comes out. Fine. But so far, we're stuck with Masechtas Gerim. The Chida in a different piece says that in the Meiri and Ksav Yad, which I've said numerous times, that the Meiri, which is mostly published after the Chida dies, but he saw it in Ksav Yad, he brings down a Braisa of Tzitzis, and he says that this is what the Meiri says. This is one of the 7 Masechtas. So now we are finally being introduced to a 4th of the 7 Masechtas. Similarly, the Ramban and Peirush Adam also brings down the Braisa of Tzitzis. Okay, so now we're changing up the story a little, and we're learning that there is more Masechtas to the 7 Masechtas, and we're even getting a name. We got Tzitzis. Fine. Okay, the Chida talks about it a little more. He mentions the point that I made from the Shas that they advertised and they didn't publish it. Okay, fine. And they promised it. He says another Shas, also the ones that I pointed out. Fine. Very good. But now, what are the 7 Masechtas? That's unclear. So over here he speculates that Masechtas Machos, Masechtas Seifrim, Masechtas Kala, Derech Eretz Rabbah, the Derech Vizuta, those are part of the Masechtas. And then he says even Masechtas Eretz Yisrael that they said in the Shas that they have is part of the 7 Masechtas. Problem is, we don't even know what that Eretz Yisrael Masechta is. And now we're seeing that you're changing it around because he found the Ramban and the Meiri that says there was something called the Masechtas Tzitzis. Okay. Then the Chida makes life even more complicated. He finds that there's something called a Medrash Tmura. Fine, we say that. Anyway, make a long story short, the Chida addresses it yet again, and he says, what's the final version for him, the 7 Masechtas? So he says it's Seifrim, Smachos, Evil Rabasi, Kal Derech Eretz Sutas. Okay, then he handles it in yet another place. So the point is, it's very unclear, according to the Chida, what are the 7 Masechtas? We don't even know. Fine, we move on. Basically, the point over here is that the person who is even interested in this topic, and he's ultimately involved with the publishing of some of them, is the Chida. This does not come to us as a surprise. As we know about him from season 2, a bit, and one day we'll Mirz Hashem talk about him much more, but the point is he was obsessed with Torah of Chazal, and we showed him during his travels, where he was fundraising, he made it his business to seek out all the materials which he could in all the various libraries, public and private. Incredible story for a different time. Now, but it's not only that the Chida is the person interested in this. It turns out there's another Chashav Yid at the same time, a little younger than him, who's also into this type of stuff, to put it mildly. And that is who? R Avrohom Ben HaGra, the son of the Gra. So we have a work that was only published a long time after he dies called Rav Palim. This is an incredible work. And just to understand a little bit what this work is, Rav Shlomo Kohen gives in the Haskama, he says that the point was he was trying to track down all the Midrashi Chazal Ashaloi Bod B'Tfus Adayim. But where are they? They're quoted in all the different Gainim, Rishonim, and Achreidim. You mean to say, let's say, what we're talking about. The Ramban says it's a Braisa, the Masechtas Tzitzis, but we don't have it. But the Ramban saw it and he brings a piece. So the R Avrohom Ben HaGra systematically went through dozens and dozens of Svarim, Rishonim, Achreidim, to collect them all, and he has it in a beautiful work called Rav Palim, and he talks all about them. So this is the nature of the work, and this is one of the things, a quest of his for lost Chazal, I would say. Now, so in this Rav Palim, and that's what one of the goals is, he brings about all different Svarim and where they are. He has a Harichos discussing our Sugya of the Sheva Masechtas, also handling what are they, and he brings down the same Ramban that the Chida talks about. And he says, in his point in time, there was 3 Masechtas published. What are they? Number 1, Masechtas Seifrim, Masechtas Machos, Masechtas Derech Eretz. Then he says, what's the next one? Masechtes Gerim that the Chida just published, that the Migdal Oiz talks about. Fine. Then he says, it's similar to he throws out a sentence, which we'll see soon enough that there's more to it, but there's some type of connection similar to the Rambam. Okay, that's his opinion. And Bekitzer, he brings down the Ramban, the Sefer Trumis, fine. So, and he says that there's basically another Masechta known as Masechtas Tzitzis, but they didn't see it. He also talks about that Masechtas Eretz Yisrael, he talks about Masechtas Gehenim, etc., etc. Then the interesting idea that he says at the end, I spoke to my father, the Vilna Gaon, and he tells me that there were 7 Masechtas, but there's also Masechtas Tefillin, Masechtas Mezuzah, and he says there was also something called Masechtas Chanukah, which we devoted a whole episode once about. Now, how in the world did the Gra know this? That R Avrohom Ben HaGra says he doesn't know where his father even got this from. Okay. Lamaisa, there's an interesting Messiah from a great nephew of the Gra that says there was even a Masechta called Masechtas Emunah. Again, on various Masechtas in Midas and Anava and Betachin, but we have no idea where the Gra even knew this. Speculation would link to his travels, and maybe he saw it in some manuscript, etc., etc. Okay. Anyway, but at this point in time, we're now showing that it's not only the Chida, it's also the Vilna Gaon's son. These are 2 people that are concerned about lost Chazals, and they both republish it, as I said. The R Avrohom Ben HaGra, he republishes in 1802 the Maseches Gerim from the Chida. Fine. But again, where are the rest of the Masechtas? Fast forward to 1851, a Yid Rebbe Frau Kirchheim in Frankfurt publishes from manuscript the other Masechtas. He includes in this work of the other Masechtas that he publishes valuable notes, showing Lamashal, just like the Migdal Oy says, that the Makar for the Rambam is certain times from Masechtas Gerim. So he shows that in these other Masechtas that he's publishing of the Sheva Masechtas, that they could be the Makar for the Rambam. What are the Masechtas? All of a sudden we now know Sefer Torah, Mezuzah, Tefillin, Tzitzis. So Tzitzis we got the insight about, but now we're finding out that besides for the original 3 that we knew about already from the Chida, which was Avadim, Kusim, and Gerim, we're now it's official, Tzitzis, Tefillin, Mezuzah, and Sefer Torah, and we have the text. This is in 1851. Fine. When he publishes it in 1851, he gives it to 2 tremendous Talmidei Chacham in his time, a Yid Rabbi Yaakov Halevi, who recently in Yerushalayim has been an incredible write-up about him, who he was, and some manuscripts of his, and a Yid Rabbi Zalman Geiger, also, I believe it's the Baal Divrei Kehilos on Minhagim of Frankfurt. Anyway, they also wrote a bunch of aris in it, and it's available on Hebrew books. So this is the first time in 1851 that all Sheva Masechtas, now we know what they are, and we have the actual text. Fine. Fast forward 1883, Vilna Shas is being published. And like I mentioned earlier, every Shas wants to incorporate the latest new materials. So what do? They hunt out different materials from all over. Rishonim they're publishing, and they write about it. Peirush in the back called Achras Davar. So one of the things they include is, so this is the first time when you buy a Shas that actually you will be able to have the Sheva Masechtas. They use this edition, and they don't say much about it. They just say they got it from there, and they have the beer of the Nachlas Yaakov on Masechtas Gerim, and that's it. Fine. So now the story is till 1883. What happens going a little further? A Yid in 1888 publishes a Peirush on Avadim and Kusim. Why? That's a good question. He says, people ask him, what are you writing about it? Avadim and Kusim, it's not Negea today. So he says, Lamaisa, it's a real thing. It's Chazal, so that's already enough. And he tells too the famous Gemara, Irani Dachas, Saira Meira, all these things. It's Dreish V'Kabel Schar. So just like it doesn't have Halacha L'Maisa, there's still an Inyan Lahagdil Torah La'adir, and that's why he's one of the reasons why he's doing it. He says, oh, you might ask me, maybe I should pick something that's more Halacha L'Maisa. Okay, fine. And he deals with it in his introduction. This is a Hieger called Yad Yisrael, published in 1888. Fine. In 1930, a Yid known as Hieger, for all practical purposes, we're going to call him Hieger because that's how he's referred, but his name was Mechon Hieger. Mechon Hieger publishes for the first time based on manuscripts after the edition of Kirchheim. He has some more manuscripts, earlier manuscripts of the Masechtas, Ketanos, and it's available, I believe, on Hebrew books. Fine. 1 minute. Now, so what happens is like this. Masechtas Kusim which we said is one of the earlier Peirushim that's published. So Mechon Talmud Yisraeli a few years back decides they have a brilliant idea to publish it when they no one really published Masechtas Kusim other than Chaim Kanievsky, so they publish a fancy Masechtas Kusim along with their entry about Kusim, including Haras or Zam Nechemia, and they track down all the materials about it, and including this Chibur Yad Yisrael, etc. And then, interesting, they even have like a tshuva of Rav Tzaddik in Tshuvis, where Tzaddik is all besimcha. He says, "Oh, just now Maseches Gerim, one Masechtas just came out," and you see that it starts to be used, but it's not really quoted. Okay, Lamaisa, the Stipler told Reb Chaim Kanievsky that he saw by Menachem Zemba. Menachem Zemba showed him or told him that he has a ganze massive chibur on Masechtas Avadim. But sadly, we know it's a mystery out of Yom what happened with the Ksavim of Reb Menachem Zemba. They hid it, but they have not been able to find it after the Holocaust. Okay. Anyway, but Masechtas Tefillin, Mezuzah, and Sefer Torah, no one wrote about until the 1960s when Reb Chaim Kanievsky decides he's going to do it. Now, what he says and what he does and the methods and the Sefer and interesting points, and Mitzvah I'm going to deal with soon. But what's interesting is it's already out there. As I said, from 1880s, you would think a yid like the Mishnah Berurah, who was using new Rishonim and looking for different things, and even the Aruch HaShulchan, L'mashal Masechtas Seif from the Aruch HaShulchan uses a Welt where it's relative. They don't mention it. Okay, I don't know. I don't have a clear answer. But anyway, there's one last question that needs to be addressed about this, and that is, what is the origin of these works? We're saying, yeah, Rishonim had it. Okay. So, first of all, which Rishonim had it? So here, you open up L'mashal, this Hieger, Mechon Hieger, and you'll see right away, he shows you a list. So we already mentioned the Rambam, the Meiri, the Sefer Trumas. He adds to the mix a Talmud Rashba of Yaakov Skili. He has other quotes of different other manuscripts, material of people that had it. The Maram Chalava had it. It seems as early as the Baal Halachas Gedolos had it, and the Migdalois we said had it already, and that's his list, including he seems to say that the Sefer Yochsan had it. Chaim Kanievsky adds to the mix whenever he talks about this. Kafta Referach had it. So there are Rishonim that had it, and Chaim Kanievsky in each one of the Masechtas has a whole long list. People had Rishonim had it. Fine. So they had it, but how far back does it go before that? L'mashal, and this is the question that I already mentioned a few times, does the Rambam have it? It's unclear. L'mashal, this Chaim, he's saying that the Rambam had it. He's going based on the Migdalois, and he shows in his work that the Rambam had it. Fine. But is it true that, is it so simple that the Rambam had? And what, and this will get to bring out how early this work is. And the Ha'ar is as follows. There is a famous Rambam, the Rambam which in Menachlas, in Peirush HaMishnah, talks about why did Rebbe not make why don't we find that there's a special Masechta but in Mishnayos, that's going back very early, for tzitzis, tefillin, and mezuzah. And davening, l'mashal. You need to know it. Everything else under the sun is a Mishnayos. Says the Rambam, a famous statement, V'tama davar l'daiti, persuman bezman chibur ha-mishnah. Everyone knew this. It wasn't a question. What do you daven? Everyone knew hilchos of davening. So there was no reason to have a special chibur of dinim for these areas. Everything else, everyone didn't know. But according to the Rambam, tzitzis, tefillin, mezuzahs, it was necessary to. It wasn't necessary for Rebbe to include it and make a special masechta, even though there are some halachas about it, because everyone knew it. Okay, this is a famous Rambam. The Maisa, Rabbi Yaakov Shor, in his work on Akdama to Tosefta, he says he doesn't understand. Everyone knows Hilchos Tefillin Mezuzah, they're very complex. There's many details, and it's possible they're even more complex than Kriya Shema, which we do have a Masechta. To illustrate the point, I always like to bring out the Chafetz Chaim's son writes that his father spent months working on 2 siman of Hilchos Tefillin for the work of Mishnah Berurah. Everyone knows the Ksivas Ha'isiyos is an unbelievable. I mean, today, all aspects of Safros it's a whole parsha. People could spend years on it. The amount of all different things in every aspect. Not only, as we're going to see in the future episodes, some of the very shilas, but there's much more shilas. Mezuzah has dozens of svarim written on Mezuzah. Tefillin, Sefer Torah, the way to write it, and then all other aspects. Okay. So he thinks, Rabbi Yaakov Shor says, that there was some type of work devoted to Hilchos Tefillin, and it was lost. And this, he says, was what Masechtas Seifrim ends up being, and Masechtas Tefillin, to say these are later versions of a lost work. Okay. So now it could be that the Rambam, when the Rambam is talking about it, he's saying Chibur HaMishnah, that period of time, as early back as Rebbe, they taka knew it. But if you're going to go later on in the time of Chazal, the Gemara, and even later, then people start forgetting it, and that's why these Masechtas, such as Seifrim, which deals a lot about Hilchos Davening, and the Sefer Tefillin, Mezuzah, and Sefer Torah, Tefillin, Mezuzah, they are later works. Okay, this is one possibility. Fine. It seems that Lamashal, very interesting Yid, Rav Kelhar. So in the work of his, he talks about the Rabbanan Savarai, and he says very simple. He brings down this Rambam, and he says this was the job of the Rabbanan Savarai. And he say it's after the Talmud, and he says that one of the jobs were they started forgetting all the aspects, and that's what all these Masechtos are that we have: Masechtas Seifrim, Masechtas Tefillin, Mezuzah, Tzitzis, Avadim, Kusim. These are all things that at one point everyone knew, and then once the Rabbanan Savarai saw that they don't know them, so then they went ahead and they transcribed it. Okay. Just 2 more ideas about this. 3 more ideas, and that's it. Number 1 is Reb David Luria, the Radal, in his incredible Hagois on Medrash, when he shows Lamashal to be mefarish a Medrash and Achrimos, where it says over there, Kegoin Hilchus Tzitzis Tefillin Mezuzah Afheim Bechlal Matan Torah. So over there he brings down in this Haggah, he says Kegoin. It's referring to Ke'ein Masechtas Ketanos, and he brings down the R Avrohom Ben HaGra, who heard from his father, the Vilna Gaon. What's the Zayin Masechtas Ketanos? It's Tefillin Mezuzah, Masechtas Chanukah, etc. And then he brings down a Tshuvas HaGaonim that he wrote a Arasan, and what does it say in the Tshuvas HaGaonim? That basically the Seder Mishnayos we know has 6 Siddharim, but it seems in various Neschayos of Gaonim much more. What happened to it? So that's what he says. There were much more, and that could be where all these Chiburim are coming from. And then at the end, he tells Su, Ein Peirush Mishnayos Rambam in Menachlas. And he says, Mishnah. So again, what I suspect is this Nakuda, that in the times of Mishnayos, that's what the Rambam is talking about. As time went on, or similar to Rav Kemelar, or according to Back Short, then it started to be, so if we're trying to date the work, it's halachas that are real halachas early on, but it was only put down, or so to speak, even if it was put down on paper, that's its own discussion, but at a much later date, such as the Rabbanan Savarai. From the Netziv in Kadmus HaEmek, it would sound like it might be earlier. He talks about this also, about these early works, but it's vague. He calls it Binyan Talmud. He doesn't, when he's talking about specifically Masechtas Seifrim, Masechtas Ketanos, it's not clear if he's going earlier than what I'm claiming right now. Okay, Seder. And the last Nakuda is this Yid, Rebbe Fall Kirchheim. So he throws out there an interesting thing. I said that some people show that, let's say, Maseches Gerim is Daled Prakim, it's a similar style to Yerushalmi. So here he says that intense Iyun shows that the Lashon is very early. It's Lashon HaMishnah, Tzach v'Naki. V'loi nimtz ben rak halachas pshutais u'psukais v'rak mamari v'shenis hatanaim v'loi shem amayir v'loi sipuri maisos. So it sounds like from him, it's a very early work. So it could be it's an early work, and it would go, it's not the same as necessarily as the other possibilities I just mentioned. Anyway, to conclude is, so these works, now we've identified where these works are, what they are, where they came from, comes along in the 1960s. Reb Chaim Kanievsky says, first, before anything, there's a few of these works of Chazal. However early back you want to go, but these are Messiahs of Chazal, there's no Peirush on them. So he goes and says, I'm going to write a Peirush. So, Mirza Hashem, we're going to discuss more about Barichas, but according to what we said in season 1 already, it's one suggestion of one of the Nakudas behind it is very simple. Why is Reb Chaim Kanievsky doing this? We said already way back, I think even maybe the first episode, I said there was 4 different great influences on Reb Chaim Kanievsky. One of them is the Vilna Gaon. This aspect of Kol Torah Kula with the Vilna Gaon had a tremendous impact on Chaim Kanievsky, so much so that he chazers Kol Torah Kula. Now, when he does his chayvus, he adds in Masechtos Ketanos. It's part of his Seder. And he was Messiah every year, all the Masechtos Ketanos. And so he said, so the point is, he sees a part of Chazal that's not being written on. He's not being, no one explained it. So he says, I have to write a Peirush, and he writes a systematic Peirush, which we will discuss barichos. He continues this, as I said, in further episodes, we'll deal with something called Brisa de Mlachas HaMishkan, Brisa de Mazolis. These are works, early works of Chazal, that there were no Perushim. Chaim Kanievsky decides he has to write a Peirush. Okay, and Mirz Hashem, we'll continue next time.
Okay, thank you very much, Rabbi Dr. Brut, for this first episode in season 3. I'd like to thank our sponsor again. If any questions, comments, suggestions, please reach out to eliezerbrut@gmail.com or myself, shweidm@ou.org. This may be the last time we get to see Rabbi Dr. Brut with a beard for a while. And thank you very much. Looking forward to next time.